Hollywood gets nuclear disasters all wrong. We're trained to expect a giant mushroom cloud, a big movie explosion. But the real threat to modern cities is quieter, slower, and far more likely, a nationwide power outage. When the grid goes down, our nuclear reactors don't blow up. They enter a desperate countdown. They switch to emergency diesel generators, but what happens when that fuel runs out? That starvation is what decides if a city lives or dies. Today, we're going to map out exactly how this collapse would unfold. Which reactors fail first, the 72-hour chain reaction, and the few safe corridors that might remain. This is the nuclear collapse map. Let's get right into it. The single biggest vulnerability of every nuclear reactor in America isn't its core. It's the electrical grid. Every single U.S. reactor relies on the same offsite power that lights your home. It's needed for pumps, cooling systems, and all the safety controls. That's the normal, everyday mode. So when the grid fails, the plant is forced onto its last line of defense: on-site diesel generators. Now here's the critical part. Most reactors only store enough diesel for 24 to 72 hours. The plan is always to refuel them with trucks, but think about a true national disaster. What if the roads are blocked? What if bridges are out? What if the refineries themselves have no power? Those fuel trucks will never arrive. Once the diesel is gone, there is no secret backup plan. There are some emergency batteries, but they only buy you a few more hours, not days. Without power, you can't pump the millions of gallons of water needed to keep the reactor core from melting. And even the water itself isn't guaranteed. Many reactors are built in risky locations: floodplains, hurricane zones, and even earthquake-prone areas. A flood can swamp the water intakes. A severe drought can drop river levels too low. A hurricane can clog the entire system with debris. This brings us to the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to talk about. It isn't a reactor's design that will determine a city's fate in a grid-down scenario. It's logistics. You can have the safest, most advanced reactor in the world, but if fuel trucks can't reach it, or if water can't flow through it, the clock starts ticking. And once that countdown begins, it doesn't stop. Today, we're not talking about politics or fear. We're talking about physics and logistics. We're ranking America's nuclear reactors to see which ones fail first when the grid collapses. So how do we do it? We use 6 key metrics. First, off-site power resilience. Every single reactor needs the external grid to run its cooling systems. If a plant has just 1 or 2 major transmission lines, it's fragile. But if it has multiple, redundant lines and substations, it can survive much longer. Second, flood and storm exposure. Some reactors are built on rivers that flood, coastlines that surge, or in basins that trap stormwater. If those crucial cooling pumps or electrical switchyards go underwater, the countdown to failure begins immediately. Metric number 3 is road access for diesel fuel. When the grid goes dark, a reactor's life depends on diesel generators. But what if the plant has only one highway, one bridge, or one coastal road leading to it? If that route is blocked, they could run out of fuel in a matter of hours. Fourth, local fuel supply. Is the reactor near a refinery or a major fuel depot? If so, it can be refueled during a crisis, but if it's in a remote area, it's on its own. And remember, when an entire region is desperate for fuel, hospitals, police, and cities will get priority over a power plant. Metric number 5 is cooling water vulnerability. Ocean intakes can get clogged with debris during a storm. River intakes can fail during a drought, or when hit by a surge of sediment. Reservoirs can drop below safe suction levels. If the water stops moving, the cooling stops working. It's that simple. And finally, population pressure. A reactor near a massive city faces a unique threat. Millions of people will be competing for the same fuel, water, and emergency routes. High population density means heavy traffic, and heavy traffic means diesel trucks can't get to the plant in time. Now, using these 6 metrics, we can classify every U.S. nuclear site into one of 3 tiers. Tier 1 reactors are the most vulnerable. They have a survivability of 0 to 48 hours. These are the plants that will feel a grid collapse almost instantly. They're a perfect storm of vulnerable transmission lines, flood-prone equipment, and single-route diesel deliveries. Their emergency generators will buy them some time, but not much. For a Tier 1 plant, the real clock starts the second those fuel trucks can't get through. Next are the Tier 2 reactors with 48 to 120 hours of survivability. These plants can handle the initial shock. They might have stronger grid connections, better site elevation, or more stable cooling water sources. But they cannot survive a multi-day disruption. If resupply convoys get stuck, if rivers drop or flood, or if nearby cities demand all the emergency fuel, these plants will slide into emergency cooling mode. For Tier 2, it's not the engineering that fails, it's the logistics. If they get support, they can stabilize. But if they're left isolated, they just become a Tier 1 failure in slow motion. Finally, we have Tier 3 reactors, which can last 120 hours or more, but only with intervention. These are the plants with real redundancy. They have multiple transmission lines, stable water sources or backup cooling plants, and 2 or more major road routes for diesel delivery. The population density around them is moderate, so the competition for fuel isn't overwhelming. Tier 3 reactors aren't invincible, but they have the longest runway. With coordinated logistics, emergency refueling, and federal or military resupply, these sites can hold on for days longer. That extra time is everything. It's the difference between a controlled shutdown and creating a permanent exclusion zone. Now that you understand the system, let's look at the top 10 reactors most at risk. Ever wonder what keeps a nation's power grid planners up at night? It's not just blackouts. It's the facilities that could turn a regional disaster into a national crisis. Today, we're counting down the top 10 nuclear reactors most at risk in the United States. Let's start with number 10. Turkey Point in Florida. Its biggest threats are hurricane storm surges and its reliance on saltwater canals for cooling. A Category 3 or stronger hurricane could knock out the Miami power grid. If that happens, the plant's on-site diesel generators would be under stress within 12 to 24 hours. And with flooded roads, getting more fuel delivered would be impossible. The immediate result? The entire Miami metro area loses power, including the pumps for drinking water. Mass evacuations would gridlock the causeways, and South Florida hospitals would be left with minimal backup power. Coming in at number 9 is Waterford 3 in Louisiana, right near the New Orleans and Baton Rouge corridor. This plant's main risks are Mississippi River levee stress and storm surges, plus it's surrounded by a network of critical refineries. A major storm could cause transmission lines to fail, and if the levees breach or bridges flood, diesel fuel resupply would be cut off within 2 days. This would shut down the Gulf's industrial corridor, collapsing regional fuel distribution and causing cascading water and medical outages further inland. Number 8 takes us north to Prairie Island, Minnesota. Situated on the Mississippi River, the primary risks here are river flooding and massive ice jams, plus the fact that it has only a single bridge for access. A rapid rise in the river or an ice jam could completely sever its only road connection. The on-site diesel generators can last up to 48 hours, but without a way to bring in more fuel, they're on a very short clock. The consequences would ripple out to the Twin Cities, putting immense pressure on pipelines and rail lines and disrupting agriculture across the river basin. Next up, number 7, Diablo Canyon on California's central coast. This plant faces a trifecta of threats: earthquake risk, coastal grid stress during heat waves, and wildfire-driven transmission outages. A major earthquake or a sustained heat wave could knock out off-site power. Depending on road access for diesel resupply, the plant could become vulnerable in just 1 to 3 days. The result? Central California would lose a huge source of power, thousands would need to be evacuated from the coast, and the region's water distribution could be damaged long-term. And finally for today, at number 6, we have Browns Ferry in Alabama, located in the Tennessee Valley. Its primary risks are its location in the heart of a tornado corridor and its connection to an aging transmission system. A severe tornado could easily sever its main 500 kilovolts power lines. Without priority convoys to deliver fuel, its diesel generators would only last about 48 hours. This would trigger a cascade of grid stress across the southeast, leading to hospital outages and problems at refineries. That's our first 5. It's a sobering look at the vulnerabilities in our power infrastructure. At number 5 is Indian Point in New York. Even though it's decommissioned, it still stores a massive amount of spent nuclear fuel on site. These spent fuel pools need constant cooling. In a total blackout where backup systems fail, the water in those pools could start to boil off within 48 to 72 hours. The potential consequences for the densely populated New York City suburbs are staggering, from mass evacuations to long-term economic shock. Coming in at number 4 is the Oconee plant in South Carolina. Its unique risk comes from an upstream dam. If that dam were to fail, the plant would lose its primary source of cooling water. Backup plans exist, but getting alternative water sources and fuel for pumps to the site within a 24 to 72-hour window during a regional disaster would be a monumental challenge, putting immense strain on the Carolinas. Number 3 takes us to the desert, Palo Verde in Arizona. This is the only nuclear plant in the U.S. not located on a large body of water. Instead, it relies on treated wastewater piped in from Phoenix. If that water supply is cut off, whether by drought, pipeline failure, or cyberattack, the plant's cooling capability would plummet. A simultaneous power and water crisis in a major urban center like Phoenix would be catastrophic for the entire Southwest. Our number 2 spot is Braidwood in Illinois, representing a risk common to many Midwestern plants. It sits on a river and is a major hub for electricity transmission. The threat here is a double whammy: severe river flooding that could knock out both the plant and the surrounding infrastructure. If bridges and rail lines are washed out, getting fuel and supplies for backup generators could become impossible within 24 to 48 hours, paralyzing Chicago's supply chain and sending ripples across the nation's food distribution network. And the number 1 most vulnerable nuclear site on our list is the San Onofre region in Southern California. The plant is shut down, but like Indian Point, it stores spent fuel right on the coast. It's in a densely populated area with massive grid congestion, and it's sitting right in an active seismic and tsunami zone. A major earthquake could simultaneously cause a blackout and damage the spent fuel storage. Emergency response in a chaotic grid-down Los Angeles would be incredibly difficult, making that 24 to 72-hour window for restoring cooling absolutely critical. If you think this sounds like a movie plot, just look at what happened at Fukushima in Japan. The plant lost grid power from the earthquake, and then its backup diesel generators were flooded by the tsunami. Batteries died, cooling pumps stopped, and the nuclear crisis unfolded. The lesson is universal. It's not just about reactor design, it's about logistics. So what does this collapse timeline actually look like? In the first 6 hours after a nationwide grid failure, reactors automatically shut down and diesel generators kick on. But from hour 6 to 24, the situation gets dire. Fuel for those generators becomes the most critical resource in the country. Highways become parking lots. Refueling convoys struggle to get through, and the clock keeps ticking. The 72-hour mark is the point of no return for many of these facilities without intervention. Understanding these vulnerabilities isn't about panicking. It's the first step toward building a more resilient grid and having smarter emergency plans. Preparedness is key. In the first 6 hours, the regional grid fails. Across the country, nuclear reactors automatically scram, shutting down the chain reaction. Offsite power is gone. Backup diesel generators roar to life, and emergency sirens begin to wail. At the same time, hospitals switch to their own backup power and start rationing supplies. The system is stressed but holding. From hour 6 to 24, the situation becomes critical. That constant roar of diesel generators? They're burning fuel at an incredible rate. On the outside, panic sets in. Highways become parking lots as people try to flee or hunt for fuel. The convoys meant to resupply those generators get stuck in the chaos. State logistics, the invisible web that holds society together, starts to tear under the sheer volume of need. Now we enter day 2. Between hour 24 and 48, the first reactors begin to run out of diesel. Others lose their scheduled fuel deliveries to blocked roads, flooded bridges, or civil unrest. With automated systems failing, plant operators switch to partial manual control, a desperate last-ditch effort. Evacuation zones, once a localized precaution, start expanding around multiple nuclear sites at once. This is when the cascade begins. In the final 24-hour stretch, from hour 48 to 72, reactors across several states enter prolonged cooling emergencies. It's not just the active cores. The spent fuel pools, containing decades of highly radioactive material, also require constant, active pumping to stay cool. But there's no fuel left for the pumps. Multiple sites are forced to declare no-go perimeters, and the collapse ripples outward. Food distribution freezes. Medical oxygen networks start to fail. Notice we haven't even mentioned the word meltdown yet. No mushroom clouds, no sensational headlines. Just systems failing one by one because the power that connected them is gone. The real devastation for the public starts long before anyone talks about radiation. In hospitals, fuel shortages mean canceled surgeries. Ventilators and neonatal intensive care units, which rely on constant power, are now at extreme risk. the trucking industry grinds to a halt. With diesel rationed or unavailable, grocery store shelves stop being restocked. Within 48 to 72 hours, they are bare. Your tap runs dry. Municipal pumps that bring clean water to your home lose power. Potable water is either strictly rationed or cut off completely. This is the key takeaway. It's not radiation that empties American cities. It's the loss of the machinery that keeps humans alive. So, where is safe? We need to stop thinking in terms of cities and start thinking in terms of corridors. Cities are fragile nodes. Corridors are pathways for survival. Let's look at a map of risk and resilience. The exclusion zones, the places you cannot stay, become obvious. Coastal reactors and hurricane corridors, Gulf Coast plants on floodplains, the Southern California coastline, and the entire Mississippi River basin during a grid-down event. But there are corridors of survival. The Nevada high desert, with its low population and stable underground aquifers. The eastern Oregon and Idaho plateau, offering elevation and independent water systems. Central Wyoming and western Nebraska, with low population density and resilient rail infrastructure. Even the Texas Hill Country, with its inland elevation and pockets of water. When a reactor loses its lifeline, it doesn't explode like a bomb. It starves. And a starving reactor doesn't just die. It starves the cities and regions around it. The real nuclear threat from a grid collapse isn't a Hollywood flash. It's a slow, grinding rewrite of America's habitable map. And if you want to understand the very first domino that starts this entire chain reaction, you need to see our next episode. We'll be covering the refinery collapse sequence, exploring what happens when America loses its fuel nodes. Because without refineries, nothing moves. Not trucks, not food, not ambulances. Not even the diesel that keeps the nuclear plants alive. Subscribe and stay sharp as we map the failure lines of the modern world. This is 0 Hour Atlas. We don't predict doom. We map what survives. Thanks for watching.